I think people saw Impact and Yank by Mom on the same team, and they said this is going to be a top 3 team in NA.
I would consider GBM like the Keen from last split, where he can just play anything he wants and do really well.
Pretty bloody game. Is he going to go mid-Zillion? I think he's going to go mid-Zillion.
Oh, it's locked in.
I think he's really good at surprising his opponents with like new picks. Like, wow, like we just got 0-19.
And this is a chain of events that TSM just can't seem to recover from.
Oh, that's going to be real bad. That's Bjergsen this time.
제 느낌은 개인기랑 이기면 시너지 상관없이 이길 수 있어요. 근데 물론 시너지도 중요하긴 한데 개인기랑 우선.
Baron Pit against Lissandra is a very dangerous place. And that's why GBM blows him up.
그게 좀 빛을 많이 발한 것 같고 아마 CLG도 그거 의식하고 있을 것 같아요. 창석이 형 그 플레이 만드는 거.
It's game day once again here in Los Angeles, and today teams cross the halfway point of the spring split and make their push towards playoffs. As you can see, the crowd has plenty of energy today, and just a moment ago they were showing their team pride and storming the battle arena, ready for another day of action. Of course, it kicks off with Renegades in game 1. There's a good guy, Crumbs, arriving a short time ago. All smiles, he'll be facing off against Echo Fox and their full roster, including Froggen back in the lineup. It's great to have you with us as we kick off Week 5 of the North American League Championship Series Spring Split. I'm James Dash Patterson, and helping me out on the analyst desk are Joshua Jat Leesman and Liquid's assistant coach, Mark Zimmerman. Thank you for coming back and joining us.
Thanks. I had so much fun last time. I just had to come back and see you again.
I appreciate that. Doesn't that make you feel good?
I'm not sure. It didn't sound very genuine.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Well, then.
Just like, oh, I just have this thing I want to say.
I think Jat's just mad because I only addressed you with it.
Yeah,
that was
what it was.
okay last
Everything you say, you just need to be like, and I'm making sure to.
And also including Jat.
Yeah. Also,
all right.
yeah.
He gets jealous.
Yay.
Sometimes. All right. Well, first things first, let's run through the standings where Immortals are still the reigning kings with their 8-0 run. Then we've got a party in second place with Cloud9, CLG, Energy, and TSM all hanging out with 5 wins. Liquid are alone in 6th, followed by Team Dignitas and Impulse in 7th. And sharing 9th place are Echo Fox and Renegades. We'll see which teams are able to make moves with our 5 games today. Up first, it's Echo Fox versus Renegades. A bit later, Cloud9 will take on Team Liquid, and we'll end with Immortals looking for that 9th straight win as they face Team Dignitas. And of course, in our second game, it's our spotlight matchup with Energy and CounterLogic Gaming facing off in a battle for second place. So let's talk about that matchup. We'll get to game 1 in a second, but this game of the week here, we've got 5 and 3 teams going up against each other. CLG, Energy, thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's going to be a big battle of the teams that are at 5 and 3, and it's a huge differentiation game moving into the second half of the season. Obviously, they haven't played each other. They know they're very close in skill. And the Huhi versus GBM matchup, I think, is really important because Huhi's been inconsistent, but he's been a huge key in CLG's success.
Yeah, for me, what's like Energy is the team to watch this week because I think this is a very interesting matchup. Energy has a lot of wins, but they're not against very good teams. They only have 1 win against teams in the top 6, and they've been gifted a free win and things like that. So I'm interested to see how they'll play against a very consistent, macro-focused team in CLG.
So still relatively untested there for Energy, or at least not putting up exactly the showing we may have expected. Now, a lot of important games today, but I wanted to start with our first matchup, and the news out of Echo Fox that after 4 weeks sitting on the sideline, Froggen and KFO are back and suiting up with the team. So now we just have to see if a fully powered Echo Fox can snap their 7-game slump and make a run at a playoff spot.
Yeah, I'm happy for Echo Fox right now because they've had such a tough road up until this point, and finally they have a chance to either succeed or fail, but at least they've gotten over the obstacles. They have their full starting roster finally, and their season can really begin.
Yeah, I have a question about like how much scrim time they got together. In week 1, we saw that there were communication issues between KFO and the rest of the team. There were some pings that went down to say like back up, and he still got caught out. And so kind of coming in seemingly kind of last minute for this game, I still expect them to win, but they have some problems that they need to address quickly.
Right, and part of the boon for that team will be Froggen coming back in, kind of being that veteran we've spoken about before. The success that they did find in week 1 was off the back end of plenty of initiations by Froggen on that Lissandra. So we'll see if they can kind of put him in that same position. But being in the mid lane, that you can only do that on so many champions.
Yeah, I mean, he plays a very lane-dominant style. He's able to win that, and then he tries to influence the rest of the map. But if he's the only one making plays, it's still a very slow play style to try to keep up with. And to Mark's point, KFO is still the only Korean speaker on that team, which makes communication in general difficult. And if pings are your only way of communication, yes, sometimes those things can get dropped.
Right. Yeah, and Froggen has like a very definitive style when he gets ahead. It's heavy vision control in the enemy's jungle and sitting and baiting them there for either Baron or just catching other teams out in rotations. And we saw that week 1, and I think assuming that he can get a lead in this game, that's how they'll try and end it.
Death bushes and Lissandra E's over walls from Raptor camps, things like that. Well, there are 4 teams tied at 5 and 3, and which of those teams, the big question here is going to make a move to separate themselves from the pack? 2 of those teams being Energy and CLG.
Right, and so I kind of mentioned it already, but Energy is the team that I'm most looking forward to in this group. I think a lot of the other teams we kind of have an understanding of, TSM, CLG, we kind of know how they play and some of their struggles, but Energy is a team that has looked really good and not so hot other times, and I really want to see how they can perform against another 5 and 3 team. So that's who I'm.
Yeah, we heard it in the bump-in, the video bump-in, that when people heard Impact and GBM on the same team, that's where the expectation came from. This is for sure a top 3 team. And then, as you mentioned, though, they're not necessarily playing like it, or at least their win-loss record doesn't suggest it, given that they've only won against one other top 6 team.
Yeah, and their 5 and 3 record is 4 and 3 in actual games played, because they did get that forfeit win early on, so very untested. I want to look at. It's a well-picked match of the week because I think CLG has a lot of potential coming into this one, because this is still the defending North American champions, even if people don't look at them that way because of the absence of Pobelter and Doublelift. But Stixxay has been improving throughout the season, so has Huhi, and if they can start getting their consistency back, they still have the same shot callers that made them the #1 team in North America in the summer split. So I think they have the highest ceiling as far as these teams here.
Yeah, I think you can see the consistency in that team, even though they swapped out a couple of like their key carries. The overall play style is very similar, and I think that's a lot to do with Tony, the coach for them, as well as Afromu. That kind of bring that into the next season and just bring players to fit that system is something that they've done really well at.
All right, well, as you mentioned, this will be a good litmus test for Energy going up against that picture of consistency in the NALCS as it stands right now. There's another face, though, that could be making his debut this week. Jhin is enabled, but the Virtuoso made it through week 5 in the European LCS without drawing a pick or ban. Pros and cons to this champion and likelihood that we see him played here in North America.
He's a very interesting one.
Yes.
Like with the 4 auto attack mechanic, I have some question marks about how he'll perform in competitive when you end up in a 2v1 setting and it's about taking that first turret quickly. Can he keep up in that, or will you just always be behind tempo when you pick him? He's a very lane dominant champion too, so there's already a kind of reason to avoid his standard laning phase. And then once you get in team fights and you're in a very coordinated team setting where people are throwing the Kalistar combo at your face, can he survive in that setting?
Yeah, and I don't think he can, which is why he wasn't picked in European LCS, and he may not be picked here. He also has a very high skill cap, but when you look at the overall kit, the fact that even though he can have some laning strengths, you can avoid that strength with the 2v1, and then you can also punish his low mobility in team fights with Assassins and Hard Engage, and he just doesn't have as defined or as overpowering strengths as you would need, I think, to bring him into competitive at least this week.
I think you're probably your best chance of seeing him, and although I do agree with you guys that most likely will not be seen.
Yeah.
I think, well, 1, sneaky, he's been playing plenty of it, but 2 would be in the mid lane, right? If you're talking about lane dominance and the prevalence of 2v1 lane swaps, then perhaps you see someone say, well, in the meantime, we'll throw a Jhin mid so that he can be somewhat of a lane bully, and you're less attached to the idea that you need someone with more than 4 auto attacks if they're coming from the mid lane.
I feel like in the mid lane, he has a lot of bad matchups, because if he is looking to push up and punish, he has no self-peel or escapes, and even though he does have wave clear, it's not as instantaneous as the other low mobility things that have seen play mid. I think he's highly punishable in the mid lane.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of mid lane champions with low mobility kind of rise up like a Varus, a Xerath, but even then, they still have better defensive options. The only thing he really has is that trap he puts down, and you put that in a choke point.
Which activates so slowly.
Yeah, activates slowly, and then half the time you can just bypass it through junglers having mobility over walls, so.
Well, probably no Jhin,
Probably not.
but who knows?
Probably not,
Maybe someone will surprise us. Right now, though, it's time to send it over to the casters to get the action underway.